Hello, Scorpio. Before we go any further, I want you to pause, not to reflect, not to overanalyze, just to notice that something inside you already knows what I'm about to say. You've been carrying something, quietly, relentlessly, in the background of your thoughts, behind every calculated move, beneath every moment of silence that others mistook for calm, and no one else has really seen it for what it is. Not fully, not clearly, because you made sure of that. You've carried it like a professional, no cracks, no complaints, no visible signs. You've carried it in the way only a Scorpio can, turned inward, hidden behind a composed exterior, processed alone and in silence. While the world mistook your strength for detachment and your self-containment for distance, but inside, there's been weight, not chaos, not collapse, just weight. A responsibility that lingered without a name, a pressure that didn't come from one event or one person, but from the entire structure of your life and how you've had to survive within it. It could have started years ago, or maybe it's recent but intense. Either way, you've held it close. Maybe because you thought no one would understand, maybe because explaining it felt like exposure, maybe because breaking it down would mean breaking apart yourself. So you did what you always do. You bore it in silence. You turned it over in your mind like a lock without a key. You hid it beneath competence, control, precision, and the world kept assuming you were fine. While inside, you were burning slow. But now, something is shifting. And this isn't just a hopeful line or a vague prediction. It's a real growth. Structural change in the way your energy has started to move. That weight you've carried, whatever it is, whoever it involves, is starting to change form. Not because someone else fixed it, not because the world suddenly gave you what you needed, but because you have reached a point where you can no longer carry what was never meant to stay. And here's the quiet truth behind it all. That burden wasn't punishment. It wasn't karma. It was preparation. The pain, the control, the sharpness, it was all part of the shaping. You weren't being crushed. You were being carved, hollowed. Yes, but with purpose. So that what is about to enter your life actually has room to exist. You were made to be ready, not by luck or ease, but by living through what you never spoke about. Scorpio, you don't need dramatic signs to know when something is coming. You feel it first in your body, in the shift of the air around you, in the change of silence. And if you're being honest, you've already felt this change starting. You've noticed the pressure isn't landing the same way. You've noticed that the old narratives no longer feel binding. You've noticed yourself saying no to things you once tolerated. That's not coincidence. That's clarity. And it's the first sign that what once weighed you down is now becoming a source of direction. The truth is, you've grown. Not in ways that are visible or public, but in ways that make you unavailable for what once drained you. What others may see as cold is actually wisdom. What they interpret as distance is your boundary. What they call too intense is just the level of depth you've had to master in order to survive. And all of it has brought you to this moment where the burden begins to turn into blessing. Quietly, strategically, without spectacle. This won't come as a loud victory. It won't be an announcement or a celebration. It will be subtle. A door that opens just as you decide to stop holding it shut. A solution that arrives once you stop trying to force it. A release that doesn't ask for forgiveness or permission, only awareness. You may not even feel joy at first. You might feel grief. You might feel tired. But eventually, that will give way to something steadier, relief. And then something even rarer for you. Trust you are not receiving a reward for pain. You are being returned to yourself, to the version of you that existed before you had to armor up. Shrink down. Hold it all in. You are not being crowned. You are being reminded the weight did not define you, but it did refine you. And now, what once exhausted you will begin to empower you. This is not about proving anything. Not to them. Not to the world. Not even to yourself. This is about no longer carrying things that never belonged in your chest. And the moment you let go of carrying, you will find yourself lifted by something else entirely, something real, something earned, something ready. So if something feels unfamiliar right now, that's okay. If you're still suspicious of ease, still double-checking the floor beneath your feet, that's okay too. You've lived long enough in survival to question safety, but that doesn't mean it's not real. The burden is ending not because you failed, but because you're finally strong enough to admit you don't need it anymore. And in that surrender, Scorpio, your blessing begins. Scorpio, whether or not you've realized it yet, something has shifted. Not on the surface. Not in any obvious way the world would applaud or label as success, but in the deeper layers of your being, in the invisible places where transformation truly happens. You've been walking through a long, private season of testing. A period in which everything familiar was made uncertain, where the structures you relied on began to crack, and where the very core of your identity felt like it was being undone. And because you are who you are, you didn't speak about it often. You didn't reach out. You didn't name it as suffering. You simply moved through it quietly, fiercely, methodically, while the rest of the world kept asking you for more. What they didn't see was the cost. The nights your chest ached for no reason, the days where your presence felt forced and your smile was a function of habit, not truth. The small, unnoticed betrayals that wore you down slowly, and the sense of isolation that came not from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who had no idea what was actually happening inside of you. You've endured, Scorpio, and you've done it in silence. You've allowed the storms to move through you without letting them destroy the parts of you that still believed in something beyond all of this. And now, finally, that long winter is breaking. The weight is shifting. The grip is loosening. The air is changing. And the universe, in its own quiet and deliberate way, is beginning to respond, not because you demanded it, not because you begged for it, but because you stayed when it would have been easier to disappear, because you chose to keep showing up for your life even when it didn't feel like it belonged to you anymore. That is what earned this moment, not your accomplishments, not your achievements, not even your resilience, but your refusal to let suffering rewrite your soul. There is something sacred about what you've endured, something deeply personal and unexplainable. And the world will never fully know the depth of it, nor does it need to, because the reward that is coming isn't public. It isn't performative. It isn't the kind of blessing that comes wrapped in applause or recognition. It is something much more meaningful. What is arriving now is a quiet flood of restoration, the kind that moves slowly at first, like water soaking into dry ground. Like light touching a room you forgot had windows. You may notice it in small ways before it becomes something larger, a sense of calm where there used to be urgency, a moment of clarity in a conversation that would have confused you before, a feeling of peace in your body where stress used to live like a tenant. This is the beginning. Scorpio, the beginning of your return not just to stability, but to self, not just to healing, but to wholeness. You're not being repaired. You're being reintroduced to the version of yourself that was hidden beneath all that weight. The part of you that still remembers softness, joy, curiosity, and yes, even trust. And what's important now is that you allow it. Don't talk yourself out of ease. Don't disqualify yourself from grace. Don't reach for the next problem just to stay in motion. There will always be something to fix. There will always be something unfinished. But you, right now, are standing at the edge of something new, not because you escaped the fire, but because you walked through it and let it change you. You let it strip away the parts of you that were built from fear, from obligation, from survival. And now, what remains is something truer, something solid, something ready. The most difficult part of this transition may not be believing in the blessing. It may be believing that it's allowed to come without pain, that it's safe to relax, that it's okay to exhale. Because Scorpio is always watching, always measuring, always anticipating the next reversal. But this is different. This is not the calm before another storm. This is the result of every quiet decision you made to stay aligned with yourself, even when you had every reason to abandon that path. You are entering a season where the energy that once pressed down on you will begin to lift you up, where the lessons of the past will stop bleeding into the present, where what was withheld from you, not out of punishment, but out of timing, will finally begin to arrive. Not all at once. Not in grand gestures, but in waves. And you will have to learn how to receive, not because you're weak, but because you've been strong for too long, and your strength has served its purpose. This is not a moment of reward for suffering. This is a moment of balance, of the scales tipping, finally, in your favor. Not because the universe is merciful, but because the cycle is complete. You've passed through the fire. You've passed through the void. You've passed through the mirror of your own shadow. And now, what's left is space. Space to breathe, space to create, space to rebuild, not just a life that functions, but a life that fulfills. You may not trust this yet. You may still be waiting for the catch. But let this be your confirmation: the trial is over. The season of contraction has ended. The chapter of endurance is closing. What comes next is not another test, but the unfolding of everything you've been secretly hoping could be true. It is happening. It is real. And it is yours. So when the blessings begin to show up, don't turn them away. Don't analyze them until they lose, meaning, don't ask if you deserve them. You do. You always did. This time, Scorpio, you don't have to fight for it. You just have to let it in. Scorpio, you've always been strategic with your energy. Even in moments where life felt uncertain and your path clouded by delay or silence, you made decisions not out of impulse, but from a deep instinct to survive and evolve. There was a moment around 7 months ago when you acted on something that didn't seem significant at the time. Maybe it was a connection you followed through on, a message you sent, a contract you ended, a project you let go of, or a skill you picked up out of sheer curiosity. Whatever it was, you didn't label it as profound. In fact, you may have even questioned whether it was the right move, but now, beneath the surface, the roots of that decision have started to break ground. What looked like a misstep, a pause, or even a détour, was actually a seed. And like all seeds, it needed time, darkness, and silence to grow. That's where you've been holding space for something that hadn't yet shown itself, but it's coming now. The return is near, not just in theory, not in some vague spiritual sense, but in measurable, tangible ways. Because the actions you took back then, however quiet, however uncertain, have set something in motion that's preparing to unfold. And it's not just one thing, it's three separate streams of opportunity. 3 entry points for abundance. 3 confirmations that you weren't wrong, you were early. You may already sense this. A conversation that circled back, a new idea that keeps tugging at your focus, an invitation that feels too aligned to ignore. These are not coincidences. These are results, and they're connected to that version of you who made a decision without knowing it would matter. The universe doesn't always reward effort immediately, especially when the effort was made out of faith rather than proof. But Scorpio, your faith is about to be honored. Not as charity, but as correction. These income streams may not look how you expected them to. They may not come through your current job or the channels you've spent years mastering. They may come through something less polished, something you almost forgot you were good at, something you didn't believe could be valuable. That's the nature of this kind of reward. It comes quietly. It grows slowly. But once it arrives, it stays. What's approaching now is not a quick fix or a one-time gift. It's a restructuring of how value flows to you. And to be clear, this isn't just about money. It's about power. Because financial independence is one of the final layers of liberation for someone like you. For a Scorpio, who values privacy, control, and autonomy more than appearances or applause. Money is not about status, it's about sovereignty. And that's what's returning to you now. The ability to choose without fear, to move without debt, to say yes and no from a place of power, not survival. There may be moments in the next few weeks when you feel overwhelmed by the possibilities. When one door opens, another quickly follows. When ideas start arriving faster than you can act on them. When people who once overlooked you begin to suddenly remember your name, don't let the flood confuse you. Let it confirm you. You ask for a sign that your energy hasn't gone to waste. This is it. Before the current lunar cycle ends, you will likely see all three income streams begin to take shape. They may arrive through different forms: consulting, passive income, creative ventures, collaborations, investments, or unexpected returns, but all three will be linked by one thread. They are tied to something you started 7 months ago. Even if you didn't realize it at the time, the impact of that decision is rippling outward now, and the results are moving toward you. But here's the key: you must remain open to receiving. Not just financially, but energetically. That means letting go of old narratives that told you you had to earn everything through suffering, that you had to prove your worth in blood before being allowed to rest, that if something comes easily, it must not be real. Those beliefs are part of what held your abundance back before, not because you weren't capable, but because you were too bound to the idea that struggle was noble. It isn't. Strategy is noble. Discernment is noble. Grace is noble. Struggle is only useful when it teaches. And now, you've learned. So now is the time to take inventory. Where have you been saying no out of fear? What opportunities have you dismissed because they look too good, too fast, too unlike you? Which conversations have returned, asking for a second look? Go back. Reconsider. There is money sitting behind a door you already walked past. There is growth waiting in a direction you thought had gone cold. You don't have to chase, but you do have to respond. You do have to move. Not recklessly, but intentionally. Trust that if it's returning now, it's because you're finally ready to receive it in full, not half-hearted, not conditional, not with shame. In full. You've waited long enough. You've cleared enough. You've earned the right to let good things come to you without resistance. And most importantly, Scorpio, you are allowed to enjoy it. You are allowed to be paid well. You are allowed to feel supported. You are allowed to build a life where the roof holds, the floor doesn't shake, and you don't have to carry everything alone. What's coming is yours because it always was. And what felt like a delay was just divine timing, aligning itself to your strength. You're not late. You're not behind. You're right on time for everything that's about to begin. Scorpio, whether you are with someone now or walking this path alone, there is a deep shift occurring in your emotional world, one that you may have sensed without being able to explain. One that doesn't make noise, doesn't announce itself with clarity, but instead moves through your soul like a gentle but undeniable current. You've always had a complex relationship with love, not because you fear intimacy, but because you feel it too deeply. And for someone like you, love has never been about convenience or comfort. It has always been about truth, transformation, and soul-level connection. And now, whether you are already holding someone's hand or still waiting for the right one to reach for yours, that connection is approaching a threshold that will change everything. If you're already in a relationship, you may have noticed that something in the dynamic has started to shift, not dramatically, not in a way others would notice, but in the silent space between words, in the way your energy moves around each other, in the way old wounds have started to resurface, not to hurt, but to heal. You and your partner are entering a phase of awakening that goes far beyond romance. It's the kind of shift that brings buried emotions to light, not to break what you've built, but to rebuild it with more truth, more presence, more depth. And while this may not be easy, it will be necessary, because the connection that survives this next chapter will not be held together by routine or obligation, but by something far stronger: conscious choice, shared growth, and emotional truth. There may be moments in the coming weeks where things feel uncomfortable, not because the love is fading, but because the truth is rising. This is the kind of awakening where masks come off, where needs are spoken without fear of judgment, where both of you are asked to meet not each other's expectations, but each other's most vulnerable truths. If there has been distance, this will be the time to close it. If there has been silence, this will be the time to speak. And if there has been pain left unspoken, this will be the time to sit with it, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as two souls who have chosen each other again and again, even when it wasn't easy. This healing will not come through words alone. It will show itself in how you hold space for one another, in how you listen when it's hard, in how you let go of the need to be right just to stay connected. And what waits on the other side is something rare, not just a stronger relationship, but a sacred one. A connection where both of you emerge more whole than when you began. A bond that no longer demands perfection, but invites growth. And a love that no longer hides behind performance, but thrives in presence. But if you are not currently in a relationship, if you have been walking this road alone, wondering if your heart still remembers how to open, then know this: someone is approaching. And this is not just another connection to fill space or pass time. This is not someone to entertain your loneliness or distract you from your healing. This is someone whose soul has been walking toward you for longer than either of you can explain. Someone who has been preparing not for romance, but for recognition, not for games, but for home. You may not meet them in the way you expect. You may not even recognize them at first. But when your eyes meet, when your energy collides, something ancient will rise to the surface. Something buried will begin to stir. And in that moment, you will know, not in words, not in logic, but in the quiet place behind your ribs where truth always lands first. You will know this is not new. This is a return, because the person coming toward you is not unfamiliar. This is a soul you've known before, in other forms, in other lives, a connection that transcends this timeline, this geography, this logic, a love that doesn't ask to be explained, only remembered. And when it arrives, it will not feel like falling. It will feel like returning to yourself through someone else's arms. You will feel seen in ways you never dared to hope. You will feel safe enough to be vulnerable, And you will feel challenged not because this person wants to change you, but because their presence will awaken parts of you that were dormant, asleep, or too protected to be touched. This is the kind of connection that doesn't rescue, it activates. That doesn't complete, it complements. That doesn't drain, it builds. And in this bond, you will not lose yourself. You will finally have space to become more of yourself. But before that happens, Scorpio, you must clear the residue of old stories. The narrative that love always means sacrifice, that closeness leads to pain, that no one can fully hold what you are. Those beliefs may have been built from real experiences, but they no longer serve what's coming. Because the love that's arriving, whether it is being renewed through your current partner or arriving through someone new, is not interested in your armor. It wants your truth, and it is strong enough to hold it. So now is the time to prepare, not by hiding, not by shrinking, but by opening. Let your past lovers rest. Let the old pain breathe. Let the version of you who settled, who feared, who tolerated too much, finally exhale. You're not repeating cycles. You're closing them. And this time, love will not arrive to teach you a lesson. It will arrive to mirror your growth. This is the kind of connection that requires presence, not perfection. It will demand honesty. It will invite softness. And it will reward you not with fantasy, but with depth, safety, and sacred transformation. This is not a story about finding someone. This is a story about remembering who you are and then meeting someone who sees it, holds it, and loves you through it. Scorpio, love is no longer something you have to protect yourself from. It is something that will now protect you. You've done the work. You've held the weight. You've faced yourself. And now, love is coming not to save you, but to stand beside you. Scorpio, if you've stayed until the end of this message, then you already know deep down this isn't just another phase of your life. This is a threshold, a turning point, a moment where everything that once felt like loss begins to feel like alignment, where every unanswered question begins to echo with quiet clarity, and where what you thought was punishment reveals itself as preparation. You didn't imagine the weight. You didn't exaggerate the silence. You didn't overthink the distance. You felt it because it was real. You carried it because you had to. But now, you can let it down. This is the moment when your pain stops being your story and starts becoming your strength. The people, the patterns, the seasons that once held power over you, none of them define what comes next. You do. With every boundary you set, with every truth you honor, with every time you choose presence over fear and peace over proving yourself, the love you've waited for, the opportunities that once passed you by, the clarity that always seemed just out of reach, they're no longer waiting. They're arriving. And all that's being asked of you now is to let them in, because the universe didn't forget you. It was building something around you. It was clearing the way for a life that doesn't just look better but feels true. And now, Scorpio, the waiting is over. Your time has come. You may walk quietly, but your presence changes everything. And starting today, you will no longer walk as the one who carried the weight. You will walk as the one who finally gets to receive.